You walk through the world as if it were the author of your story, as if every event were decided far from you, in territory you don't control. And it is precisely because you believe this that you live waiting. Waiting for money to improve, waiting for an opportunity to appear, waiting for someone to recognize your worth, waiting for some external sign that will finally allow you to feel what you wish to feel. But understand this. This waiting is the most silent and cruelest prison that exists. It keeps you captive in a cycle where life always comes first, and you come after, reacting, adjusting, shrinking back. The error is not in your desires. The error is in believing that the external is the cause and you are the effect. This is the root of human suffering, the belief that reality is something that happens to you and not something that responds to you. Nothing, absolutely nothing, manifests before it is felt. You have never received a scent, an opportunity, a relationship, a change that wasn't first sown internally as a state. The reality you perceive now, however limited it may seem, is merely the delayed echo of the sensations you held yesterday. That is why so many spend their lives wishing for wealth while feeling poverty, asking for abundance while carrying the weight of lack, affirming prosperity while vibrating insecurity. They speak of wealth, but emotionally live as someone who does not yet have it, and the world, obedient as it always is, merely reflects this internal division. The law does not fail. It has never failed. It is man who fails to apply it because he insists on looking to the external as authority. But the external knows nothing. It is merely the reflection. It is you who emits the cause. It is you who shapes the form. It is you who defines the quality of the experience, not with words, but with the emotional climate you sustain when no one is watching. And here is the truth many fear to admit. You only manifest wealth when you already feel rich before any proof, not after. Before. This is the difference between those who create and those who beg, between those who manifest and those who wait, between those who govern life and those who are governed by it. When you understand this, your inner world becomes the only place where true change happens. And suddenly, what once seemed impossible begins to approach you naturally, almost inevitably. Because reality does not choose, it obeys. Everything you feel is real becomes flesh, becomes form, becomes fact. The introduction of this teaching is not an invitation to hope, but to responsibility. Responsibility for what you assume yourself to be. Responsibility for the state you inhabit. Responsibility for the life you create, consciously or unconsciously. You are not a visitor to reality. You are its center. And when you finally accept this, you realize that nothing external has more power than the feeling you decide to carry now. And so, wealth ceases to be something distant and becomes what you allow to be born within you. Before any evidence, before any number, before any circumstance. Because everything begins with feeling, and everything ends with feeling. This is the law. This is the truth. And you always knew it. Now it is time to remember. Wealth never begins in the bank account, but rather within. This is where so many stumble, because they want the feeling to come after external change, when the law demands the opposite. You manifest what becomes natural within you, and nothing becomes natural as long as you insist on looking to the world to decide what you can or cannot feel. The starting point is always internal. Feeling is always the seed. If you do not cultivate the feeling of wealth, everything you do in the world will be rootless effort, and rootless effort does not bear fruit. The human mind has been conditioned to believe that money brings the feeling, but it is the feeling that brings the money. Someone who feels poor, even with good opportunities, acts with fear, shrinks, distrusts, hesitates. And this hesitation creates a field where nothing flourishes. In contrast, someone who assumes the feeling of wealth before proof is not pretending. They are recognizing that the cause is within, and that the world is merely the messenger of that cause. When you truly understand this, you realize that the clay of life is shaped by your emotional climate. Scripture already said, "To those who have, more will be given. From those who have not, even what they think they have will be taken away." This does not refer to material possession, but to the dominant state you sustain. To have means to feel full, abundant, supplied. Not to have means to feel needy, empty, unworthy, insecure. Life returns exactly what you are on the inside, not what you say, not what you desire. If your imagination is permeated with scarcity, life has no choice but to reflect scarcity. If your imagination is filled with the feeling of prosperity, it also will have no choice but to reflect prosperity. You cannot escape the reflection of the state you most frequently assume. When you create a mental image of abundance, entering a place without fear, paying for something with ease, accepting the best naturally, that image is not just a thought, it is a vibration. And this vibration immediately changes the way you carry yourself in the world. Your gaze changes, your gestures change, your voice changes, your posture changes. Wealth begins to infiltrate small attitudes, and these attitudes open doors that the old state would never perceive. It is not the image that manifests, it is the feeling that sprouts from it. Imagination is merely the clothing of sensation. What creates is the internal climate, not visualization alone. And when this feeling begins to become stronger than fear, stronger than doubt, stronger than human logic, the external world responds, as it always responds to conviction, by adjusting itself. Everything begins to move, not because you are doing, but because you are finally being. Manifestation is merely the delayed echo of the assumed state. First you feel, then life confirms. Always in that order. Always. Dependence on external signs is the greatest cause of spiritual and financial stagnation, because it keeps you revolving around circumstances as if they were sovereign. Most people live like those who read the weather. If money comes in, they breathe a sigh of relief. If it's lacking, they despair. If an opportunity arises, they get excited. If something goes wrong, they plunge into doubt. This back and forth creates a life entirely guided by reactions, never by internal decisions. And while you react, you do not create. While you consult the world to know what to feel, you surrender your power to the reflection, forgetting that the cause has always been within you. Nothing that appears on the outside is authority. The external has no voice of its own. It merely repeats what you allow yourself to feel as truth. The problem is that without realizing it, you've become accustomed to validating your faith by looking at circumstances created by old states. It's like trying to measure today's temperature with yesterday's weather. What you experience now is not an indicator of what is possible. It is merely the trace of what you felt before. But stubborn human beings insist on looking at this trace as if it had the power to define their future. They observe an empty bank account and conclude they cannot feel rich. They see limitations and believe they cannot assume abundance. But this is the same as expecting the reflection to change before the object changes. It is impossible. Change only happens when you decide to stop consulting the world and start consulting only your inner state. This discipline is the second birth of consciousness. It demands that you abandon the habit of looking for signs and begin to create signs. It demands that you replace the question, what does reality allow me to feel, with, what do I choose to feel regardless of it? When you do this, you break emotional and spiritual slavery. Something within you rises. You stop being influenced by lack and begin to influence abundance. It is not arrogance, it is alignment with the law. Reality only changes when you stop following it and begin to lead it. Feeling comes first, always. And when you stop depending on external signs, your world begins to reorganize silently. Things lose the power to shake you. Fear loses its strength. Doubt loses its voice. Even without any apparent evidence, you remain firm in the chosen feeling. And this firmness is precisely what moves reality. You discover that you don't need proof because the proof is in the state you have already assumed. And, as always, the physical world will do what it has always done. Obey. Sustaining the state without visible movement is the point where almost everyone gives up. Because here there is no spectacle, no immediate confirmation, no applause from life. Here there is only you, your consciousness, and what you choose to inhabit within. Most imagine something for a few moments, feel a slight internal glow, but then quickly run to check if something has changed outside. And it is in this act of checking that everything falls apart. Because those who check doubt. Those who doubt interrupt the process, and those who interrupt never manifest. Creation does not happen at the pace of human anxiety. It happens at the pace of conviction. And true conviction does not seek signs, it is the sign. When you assume a state, it needs to be sustained as an internal fact, even if the external world is still delivering the reflection of your old state. This requires spiritual maturity. It requires you to understand that physical reality is slow, dense, and delayed in comparison to imagination. It is merely the echo, never the voice. What you see now is not the truth of what you are creating. It is merely the trace of what has already been felt. Therefore, if you abandon the state because the external hasn't immediately changed, you are asking the reflection to command the mirror. And that is impossible. The cause never comes after the effect. Sustaining the state is remaining faithful to the invisible. It is acting as if you already are, feeling as if you already have, living as if you have already received, even if nothing indicates it yet. And note, even if nothing indicates it means especially when nothing indicates it. It is in these moments that you prove to yourself that you are not imagining as fantasy, but as conscious creation. Doubt appears, reason tries to argue, old fears try to pull you back to the old state. But if you remain firm in the chosen feeling, without negotiating with fear, something within you begins to solidify. The new identity ceases to be an effort and begins to become natural. It's like planting a seed. You don't dig up the earth every day to see if it has sprouted. If you do that, you kill the seed. You water, light, protect, and trust. Nature doesn't need to be watched. It needs to be respected. Imagination works the same way. If you revisit the state consistently, gently, with familiarity, it gains a life of its own. The old you gradually disappears. The new you takes shape, silently, without fanfare, without haste, until suddenly, when you least expect it, the external finally catches up with the internal. This is how manifestation happens, not as magic, but as the inevitable consequence of fidelity to the assumed state. Sustaining the state is the ultimate test of who truly creates and who merely desires. Those who desire wait for signs. Those who create sustain the state until the world has no choice but to bow before it. Living as if you already possess is the point where imagination ceases to be a distant image and becomes your new identity. This does not mean acting irresponsibly, nor pretending you have something that doesn't yet physically exist. It means moving through the world with the emotional posture of one who has already received what they desire. It is an internal state, not an external performance. It is letting the feeling take over the body before the form takes over life. When you assume this way of being, imagination ceases to be a mental exercise and becomes an inhabited territory. You don't visualize occasionally. You internally live the scene. You don't imagine money arriving. You feel the lightness of one who no longer worries. You don't fantasize about success. You breathe like someone fully established. And this change in internal climate instantly alters how you think, speak, decide, and move. Transformation doesn't begin with what you do, but with who you are while doing it. Think of a truly wealthy person. Observe their behavior, not their bank balance. They do not fear tomorrow, do not hide from life, do not shrink from decisions, do not feel guilty when choosing the best. True wealth manifests in the way a person moves, not in what they carry in their pocket. If you desire wealth, you need to internalize this climate before life delivers it, because it is the climate that shapes the path. The world responds not to your actions, but to the energy behind them. That is why living as if you already possess begins with small attitudes, paying for something without pain, choosing the best without guilt, giving thanks naturally, making plans without fear, making decisions as someone who is provided for. None of this requires money. It requires a state. When you adopt this posture, your behavior changes effortlessly. You are not trying to appear rich. You are aligning with what is true within you. Imagination becomes the matrix, the invisible model that the physical world must copy. And then details begin to happen that many would call coincidence. Opportunities appear, the right people emerge, ideas flow, paths open up. Not because you forced it, but because your internal state changed the field around you. Life reacts to your identity, not to your desire. When you live as someone who already possesses, inspired decisions arise naturally. You don't push life. Life begins to push you. The right action appears with ease, as if someone were guiding your steps. And in a way, it is your inner state. Here there is no artificial effort, there is naturalness. When you finally behave as if you already have, the world perceives it even before you do. Reality adjusts to the new climate and begins to present circumstances compatible with what you have assumed yourself to be. The external movement is merely the final signature of the internal transformation. Life asks no questions. It merely confirms the state you have decided to inhabit. Moving through the world from the state, and not from old logic, is the final bridge between the invisible and the visible. When you assume the state of wealth internally, your mind, body, and choices begin to operate on a new frequency, even if you don't consciously perceive it. Action ceases to come from need and begins to come from identity. You don't act to acquire. You act because you already are. This difference, though subtle, changes absolutely everything. Most people try to force action. They believe that if they do more, they will achieve more. But they act from fear, despair, insecurity, and therefore reap results compatible with those states. Action born of lack always carries a weight, a friction, an echo of doubt. Nothing flows. everything requires force. Everything tires. In contrast, action born of an assumed identity is light, clear, inspired. It seems obvious, inevitable, natural, as if it arose on its own. And it does. Not because something external pushes you, but because your new state reorganizes your perception. Where before you saw obstacles, now you see paths. Where before there was confusion, now there is direction. Where before there was fear, now there is decision. When you feel rich before the proof, you begin to make decisions that only a rich person would make. These are not reckless decisions, they are consistent decisions. You allow yourself to dream bigger, plan more clearly, move with more confidence. You do not shrink back when evaluating possibilities, because you have stopped measuring the world from a place of lack. And what happens when you act this way? You create space for opportunities that never appeared before. Life does not deliver abundance to someone who vibrates as if in a state of alert. It delivers abundance to someone who vibrates as if they are already abundant. This principle becomes clear when you observe truly successful people. They don't wait for life to give them permission to do what they desire. They move as if they already have what they need. If they make mistakes, they readjust. If they succeed, they expand. But they never act as if they depend on the world's approval. They follow an internal impulse born from the state, not from fear. And this is precisely what the law demands of you. That your actions reflect the identity you have chosen, and not the circumstance you see. Because acting according to circumstance is living trapped in the old reality. But acting according to the state is declaring to the universe without words who you have decided to be. Inspired action is the final link in the creative chain. It is the moment when the invisible begins to condense into the visible. When you